It started innocently enough. Nana, or Eleanor as she preferred at home, had always been the backbone of our family. She baked pies for school fundraisers, volunteered at the local senior center, and never missed a birthday or a holiday. Everyone loved Eleanor. Her laughter was warm, her advice solid, and her hands, though wrinkled, had healed scraped knees and broken hearts alike. One evening, over coffee, my cousin Rachel mentioned an assisted living home in Milwaukee. "It's a great deal," she said, "nice rooms, activities, and, well, you wouldn't have to worry about Mom being alone anymore." Alone. That word made Eleanor flinch. "I'm not alone," she said softly. "I have my friends, my routines. I like my independence." But independence didn't come with a price tag, and apparently, the deal was too tempting to ignore. The family had gathered, voices overlapping, discussing the logistics, the savings, the peace of mind. Eleanor tried to interject. "I've volunteered at this home for years. I know the staff. I know what it's like. Please." Her voice faded under the chatter. Nobody truly listened. By the following week, a moving van arrived outside her home. Eleanor packed her belongings slowly, carefully, folding her clothes as if tucking away memories into each drawer. The neighborhood kids waved, and neighbors smiled, but inside Eleanor felt a creeping sense of dread. And then came the first shock. The home wasn't what anyone had promised. Her familiar faces from volunteering were there, yes, but the atmosphere had changed. Rules were strict, schedules rigid, and the staff, well, they treated residents like numbers, not people. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself, clutching the folder of her volunteer records. "I've given my heart to this place, and now I'm trapped." Her family visited occasionally, always smiling politely, always busy with their lives. They praised the deal, but never asked if she was comfortable. Eleanor realized something painful: she had been chosen for convenience, not care. And that was the first time she understood betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers softly, dressed up as help or a financial sense, until you wake up one morning and realize your life has been cornered into someone else's plan. She began to observe quietly, noting every inconsistency, every unfair rule. And that's when a dark thought took root: if she could survive here, maybe she could turn this nightmare into justice. But how? She was alone, older, and everyone expected her to comply quietly. The challenge was monumental, the stakes high. If you're still listening, please like this video and subscribe, because this story is just beginning, and the twist you're about to hear will shock you. Eleanor's fight is not just for comfort or dignity, it's for survival, and the betrayal runs deeper than anyone suspected. The first week passed slowly, like time dragging its feet through molasses. Eleanor kept her head down, attending meals and activities, smiling politely when staff approached, all while quietly observing. She noticed little things at first: pills handed out inconsistently, meals served late, staff whispering in corners. One evening, she overheard two aides talking near the nurse's station. "Did you see what we did with Mrs. Parker's account? Family thinks they're saving money. She doesn't even notice." Her heart froze. Account? Money? She had brought nothing but her personal savings. Why would they even mention it here? That night, Eleanor stayed awake, reviewing every receipt she had kept, comparing it to the monthly statements her family insisted she wasn't bothered with. She began to piece together a pattern. Her family had signed the deal thinking the home's monthly rate was a bargain, but somehow, additional fees, hidden charges, and unexplained deductions had begun siphoning her finances. The next day, she confronted her daughter-in-law, Julia, during a visit. "Julia, why are there extra fees on my account? And why does the staff act as if they own me?" Julia fidgeted, avoided eye contact. "Mom, it's just the way the home works. You're fine." Everything's under control. Under control. Eleanor's voice trembled. My money is disappearing, and you call this control? Julia's excuse faltered, and Eleanor realized the horrifying truth. Her family had ignored her protests, prioritizing cost over care, and now the home itself was complicit, profiting from her compliance. Determined, Eleanor began keeping a secret journal. She wrote every detail, the aides who lied about medication, the extra fees, every time a family member dismissed her concerns. She even started noting the exact schedules, spotting patterns in staffing, which aide could be trusted, which was part of the deception. One afternoon, she discovered something even worse. While helping clean up the activity room, something she used to love volunteering for, she found a folder tucked behind a cabinet. Inside were documents showing residents' personal finances being used to fund renovations that were supposed to benefit everyone, but which clearly lined the administrator's pockets. Her stomach twisted. They've turned this place into a business, not a home, she whispered, clutching the papers. The betrayal cut deeper than just money. It was personal. She had volunteered here for years, given her time, energy, and heart. And now, the people she had trusted, both family and staff, were exploiting her, pretending it was for her own good. Eleanor realized that if she wanted justice, she had to be smarter, quieter, and more patient than the people who thought she was powerless. The first piece of her plan was simple: document everything. Receipts, statements, schedules, photos of conditions, notes on conversations. Every detail could be used as proof, a weapon in the quiet war she was about to wage. And the suspense was only beginning. Because Eleanor wasn't just documenting, she was also starting to lay traps, small moves that would eventually reveal the full scope of the deception, both to the administrators and to her family. Eleanor spent sleepless nights in her small room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment that led her here. Betrayal doesn't hit all at once, it seeps in, a slow poison, making you question not just others, but yourself. She asked herself again and again, how did my family let this happen? How could they prioritize a deal over me? Tears came, but they didn't drown her. They sharpened her mind. She realized anger alone wouldn't reclaim her life, strategy would. Her first move was to create a complete record. Every receipt, every medication schedule, every extra fee, every interaction with staff. Eleanor began photographing documents, taking careful notes, and even secretly recording conversations with the administrators. Each small act was dangerous. Being caught could jeopardize her position or credibility. Yet she persisted, knowing that patience was her ally. Next, she began to study the staff and their habits. Who answered questions honestly? Who whispered behind closed doors? Eleanor mapped their routines like a detective. She had spent years volunteering here. She knew every hallway, every room, every staff shortcut. That knowledge became power. But the hardest part was facing her family. When her daughter visited, Eleanor asked carefully, not accusing, but probing, "Do you know how much my account has been charged this month?" "Mom, don't worry about it." "It's all fine," her daughter said, avoiding her eyes. Eleanor felt the sting of complicity. They weren't malicious, they were careless, willing to trust the deal more than her judgment. That realization stung, but it also fueled her resolve. She could no longer rely on family intervention, she had to act alone. The next step was finding allies she could trust. Eleanor reached out to a friend from her volunteer days, Margaret, who had experience handling elder advocacy issues. Together, they examined the hidden fees, the discrepancies, and discovered that the administrators were skimming money under the guise of renovations and care improvements. This wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate exploitation. Then came the most delicate step, planning the revenge carefully. Eleanor didn't want chaos, she wanted exposure, justice, and to protect herself. She created a three-step plan. Collect irrefutable evidence, photos, receipts, recordings. Alert regulatory authorities, the state's elder care ombudsman and consumer protection agencies. Expose the scheme publicly, in a controlled, factual way to her family and community, making it impossible for the administrators to continue hiding. Every decision had to be calculated. Eleanor's anger was raw, but she turned it into patience, letting each day bring more clarity. She imagined the moment when the truth would be revealed, when those who dismissed her concerns would be forced to confront the reality of their betrayal. "They think I'm powerless," she whispered to herself one night, notebook in hand. "They think age makes me silent. They're wrong. They've forgotten I know this home better than anyone. And I will make them pay, not in spite, but in truth." Eleanor also had to prepare for the emotional cost. Planning revenge was one thing, carrying it out meant confrontation, scrutiny, and the possibility that her family might blame her. But she understood that justice for herself was worth the storm. By the end of the week, Eleanor's notebook was filled with plans, timelines, and evidence logs. She knew the next phase, execution, would require courage, precision, and patience. Every move had to be timed perfectly to expose the wrongdoing without putting herself at risk. And as she closed her notebook and looked out the window, she smiled faintly. The first domino was ready to fall, and when it did, no one would see it coming. Eleanor woke early, the kind of early where the world is quiet and her mind is sharp. Today wasn't about despair or anger, it was about action. She carried her notebook, receipts, and photographs, ready for the confrontation she had planned meticulously over weeks. First, she went to the local elder care ombudsman's office. The staff there were surprised to see her so prepared, so calm, so precise. "I volunteer here," Eleanor began. "I've documented every irregularity. Fees, medication errors, financial exploitation. I need someone to investigate immediately." They looked at the organized folders she handed over. Every paper, every photo, every note was carefully labeled and dated. One officer leaned in, eyes widening. "We'll start an official review immediately," he said. Eleanor left the office feeling a surge of satisfaction. The first legal domino had fallen. But the battle wasn't over. The administrators still ran the home, still profited, and her family was still in the dark. That evening, Eleanor staged her next move. She invited her daughter and a few trusted friends for tea. Nothing seemed unusual. Then, casually, she brought out the folder. "I've kept track of everything," she said softly, not looking accusatory, just matter of fact. "Every extra fee, every mismanaged account, every unexplained charge. Look through this yourselves." Her daughter leafed through the documents, her face paling. "Mom, I had no idea," she whispered. Eleanor smiled faintly. "You weren't paying attention. That's part of the problem." By the following week, the ombudsman's investigation began to take effect. Notices were sent to the administrators, requesting records and financial audits. They tried to dismiss Eleanor quietly, assuming she'd be scared or intimidated. But she remained calm, presenting her evidence and calmly explaining each discrepancy. Then came the climax. The state inspection team arrived at the home. Eleanor guided them discreetly, showing them areas that violated regulations, residents' financial files mishandled, billing inconsistencies, and staff neglect. The inspectors were thorough, surprised by how detailed and organized Eleanor's documentation was. The administrators tried to protest, but the evidence was undeniable. Emails, photographs, financial records, Eleanor had anticipated every excuse. By the end of the week, news spread through the community. Local media reported, elderly volunteer exposes nursing home exploitation. Eleanor's story inspired outrage, attention, and praise. The administrators faced penalties, regulatory scrutiny, and loss of licenses. Her family visited frequently after that, finally understanding the scale of the betrayal. "Mom, you were amazing," her daughter said, tears in her eyes. "I should have listened." Eleanor nodded, feeling the satisfaction of truth delivered without chaos. She hadn't yelled, hadn't lost control, hadn't resorted to anger, but she had turned strategy, patience, and evidence into justice. The final act came when the administrators attempted to appeal, but the documentation Eleanor provided, combined with public and legal pressure, made it impossible for them to continue hiding their actions. Eleanor walked the hallways one last time as an empowered witness, noticing the difference. Residents smiled more freely, staff acted cautiously, and for the first time in weeks, the home felt like a place of care again. She had survived betrayal, exposed wrongdoing, and reclaimed her dignity. The week after the investigation concluded, Eleanor finally felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The administrators had been held accountable, fines, revoked licenses, and strict oversight were now official. The home had begun implementing proper protocols, and for the first time, she felt it was a place she could respect again. Her family visited more frequently, no longer brushing her concerns aside. Her daughter held her hands tightly. "Mom, I understand now. I should have listened," she said, eyes glistening. Eleanor smiled gently. "It's okay. What matters is that we've fixed it. That we stood up for what's right." She realized that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is quiet, methodical, and undeniable, and sometimes it comes from those who appear powerless. Eleanor's patience, careful planning, and unwavering observation had turned the tide. The residents, many of whom had suffered quietly, began to regain their confidence. Eleanor helped organize small activities again, but now on her terms, ensuring fairness, kindness, and respect were at the forefront. Her experience became a story of empowerment for others in the home. In the community, Eleanor's story spread. She received calls and letters from other elderly women who had faced similar situations, asking for advice, seeking guidance. Her courage had inspired others to stand up, document abuse, and demand accountability. She reflected on her journey. Betrayal had been bitter, but it had revealed the strength she had always carried. She learned that vigilance, intelligence, and courage were sometimes more powerful than youth or brute force. "They thought I was just an old volunteer," she whispered to herself one quiet evening. "But I knew the truth, and the truth has a way of winning." Eleanor's family also learned their lesson. They understood that shortcuts, deals, and convenience cannot replace care, respect, and attentiveness. And though the administrators had tried to profit off her goodwill, karma had a patient, inevitable way of catching up. Her life returned to a steady rhythm, filled with meaningful volunteering, family visits, and quiet satisfaction. Every time she walked through the halls, she remembered the journey, the fear, the betrayal, the planning, and the ultimate triumph. For the viewers listening, Eleanor's story carries a lesson: never underestimate your own strength. Never allow someone to dismiss your voice. And always document, observe, and act wisely when facing injustice. Before you leave, hit like, subscribe, and share, because stories like Eleanor's remind us that courage and strategy, even in old age, can turn nightmares into justice. Eleanor's nightmare had ended, but her story had just begun inspiring others.